Hello, this is Clean Coach Carly. I'm the staff nutritionist for Healthy Habits Living, and I'm talking today about creatine. Now, there's been a recent surge in interest about creatine, and I'm here to explain what that's all about and why you may want to start using creatine. So let me take you back first to 1998. So creatine as a supplement, which is creatine monohydrate, that's the form that you take as a supplement, had just come out on the market and was gaining popularity. And there was whispers that it was going to be outlawed in sports events, and the athletes wouldn't be able to use it because it was almost like taking a drug, like it was an unfair advantage. And so I was a junior in college and I needed to write a rhetoric piece. So a piece about the philosophy or the values involved in something, and it needed to be a current event. And so that was a current event, right? So I had a couple of cousins that were really into weightlifting and very good athletes at school. And so I said, hey, are you using creatine? They said, yes. I said, oh, let me gather some information from some of your friends about creatine. And no one would talk to me about it because it was such a hush-hush thing. So that was a million years ago. And now creatine is very common, and it's known as one of the safest supplements, actually, with very little side effects. And recently it's made the news in connection with COVID. So let me tell you, though, a little bit more about what we know about creatine. So in the past, it was like hush hush, and people were like, oh, don't take that. There isn't enough studies done, and that's dangerous. It's bad for your kidneys. So not true. So that's been proven that it's not true. There was isolated cases of people taking way too much creatine and not drinking enough water and overtraining. And that's kind of how it got this bad reputation. Now there's been hundreds of studies, not only showing that it's safe, but it's actually effective across a broad range of conditions and outcomes. So creatine is a amino acid derivative. So it's not a full amino acid. So you're not going to find it like in an amino acid supplement per se. Usually creatine is just by itself in a powdered form. Creatine is actually made from glycine and arginine. Now you might be thinking, glycine and arginine. Yes, you get a lot of glycine and arginine in beef bone broth. So that's one place that you can get glycine and arginine for your body to make creatine. But if you're looking for higher doses, then obviously you're going to need to take a supplement. Here are some of the interesting things about creatine. We typically think about it for people who want to gain muscle mass. So whether that's athletes or people that are weightlifting, so they want to build muscle mass, but also for athletes who want to build endurance as well. We don't normally think about it for lung health and neurological health, but there's so many promising results and studies that have been done that show that creatine supplementation is good for both of those things as well. So, of course, like I said, increases muscle mass and strength. 95% of creatine is stored in your muscle. So creatine comes mostly from protein. If you're not going to take a supplement, you're going to get creatine from protein. It's stored in your muscles in a form called phosphocreatine. 95% of that is in your muscles. That's why creatine is so good for building muscle, right? 5% though is stored in your brain, your kidneys, and your liver. And so that's what helps your brain. So we'll talk about that. So people mostly take supplements to increase their creatine stores. So, they're eating their normal diet with protein, but they want to get more creatine phosphate or phosphocreatine stored in their muscles so that they can lift weights more, so that they don't eat down their muscle tissue when they're lifting weights or doing aerobic activity or strength training or whatever they're doing. So the more phosphocreatine you have stored in your muscles from either your diet or taking a supplement, the more you are going to be able to build muscle as opposed to tearing it down or catabolizing. It acts as an energy source in order for your muscle cells to make more energy, or ATP. Here's what it's good for your brain, though. It's been tested and seen to have positive results for people with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington, ischemic stroke. So these are all brain things. Epilepsy, brain injuries, TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, motor neuron diseases, memory and brain function. So they've done studies where they've seen memory and brain function improve in people that were impaired. So not necessarily if you have a baseline of normal healthy functioning, but people who were impaired. The other thing that's super interesting, and this is why creatine has been popular lately, is that it helps with airway inflammation in respiratory problems such as chronic asthma, COPD, and most recently, COVID-19. So it's been used in the rehab of people who have long-term pulmonary, so lung issues due to COVID-19. So back to the brain studies, though, then we'll go back to COVID-19. There was a 6-month long study done with kids with traumatic brain injuries, and they had a 70% reduction in fatigue and 50% reduction in dizziness. So super, super helpful for brain disorders really across the spectrum, really. Here's another interesting thing. I said that you get creatine from protein, meat, unless you're taking it as a supplement. So vegetarians, you can imagine, are low in creatine because they don't eat meat. So there was a study done showing that vegetarians who were put on creatine supplements, they improved their memory by 50% and 20% intelligence scores. They had an improvement. So it's probably a good reason not to be vegetarian, but if you're going to be vegetarian, at least take a creatine supplement so you can keep your brain working. Creatine supplementation also helps with blood sugar levels, muscle function, and quality of life in older adults. That was that study I said where people were already cognitively impaired and they took creatine and it improved the quality of their life and their mental cognition. It can also be helpful in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is part of the metabolic syndrome that is epidemic in the US. Here's how most people take it, and this is for muscle, brain, any indication, pulmonary, any indication. So the idea is that you go on a loading dose because you have to really get your muscle tissues, including your brain, including your heart. Your heart's a muscle, to start storing the max amount of phosphocreatine that it can. So you take 20 grams for 5 to 7 days. And creatine is a tasteless powder, so you can mix it in anything. Most people mix it in water. So you take 20 grams for 5 to 7 days to build up those reserves of those stores. And it's recommended 5 grams at a time, so like 4 times per day. Not all at once. That won't go well for your GI system. Then after that, you go down to 3 to 5 grams as a maintenance dose. And remember I told you there was this, idea, these rumors that, it's so bad for your kidneys. Well, yes, it can be bad for your kidneys if you're dehydrated, if you're not drinking enough water. So always drink enough water when you take the creatine, and then of course, just in your normal life. There's no actual evidence of dehydration or cramping being caused by creatine supplements. They've done studies on that too. They also checked liver and kidney issues because, there was this rumor that it's bad for your liver, it's bad for your kidney. So they did a 21-month study. So that's almost 2 years. And they looked at 52 different blood markers in chem panels and metabolic panels, liver enzymes, kidney values, and, who knows, whatever else. And they didn't see any problems in bad changes with people taking creatine. And that was for 21 months. That's a long study. I don't know if I would want to take creatine for 21 months if I wasn't sure, that was the best thing for me. Okay. So back to COVID-19, which is probably why you're on here. So the European Respiratory Society released a study and recommendations that anyone in pulmonary rehabilitation because of COVID-19 damage to their lungs should eat a diet high in creatine and should take creatine supplements. And they base this on what they've seen across the studies of creatine helping with lung function. So of course they haven't been able to do long-term studies of people with COVID because, we all know why. Okay. So creatine has a long-standing history of reducing inflammation in the lungs, helping with cystic fibrosis, which is in the lungs, stroke recovery, respiratory failure, anti-inflammatory for airways, like in asthma, and then of course, energy boosting. And so now it's been this recommendation for people with post-COVID pulmonary issues. And they suggested that anyone with acute COVID, they said something like, because creatine is such a low risk supplement, there's no point in you not taking creatine to see if it will be preventive or helpful. So that's enough for me, right? Since I've been dealing with long haul COVID for over 2 years now, Creatine is definitely something that I'm going to try. One of the results for me of long-term COVID has been cognitive issues, and so now that I know that it can help my brain, I'm much more inclined to use it. But the other thing too is because of lack of energy, because of long haul COVID, reigniting my Lyme disease, and I had a small mold exposure, et cetera, et cetera. I've lost a lot of muscle mass as well. So creatine is going to help on that end too. So brain boosting, and also muscle boosting. And then for anyone who has long-term pulmonary issues due to COVID-19, this is your next thing to put on your list to seek out and give it a good try. So I'm definitely sorry if you're experiencing long haul COVID or if you've had pulmonary complications from COVID. And if you have any other lung issues, that certainly sucks and would be great to try creatine. So I use Thorne creatine monohydrate. And like I said, it's a tasteless powder, mixes in water. Drink plenty of water with it, simply because it does pull moisture into the muscles as it gets stored in the muscles. So always here at Healthy Habits Living, we are here to help you get healthy so you can stay healthy and be healthy.